Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Lois McMaster Bujold, who is a science fiction and fantasy author. And Lois, I'm going to ask you for readers unfamiliar with your work, if you could describe what it is that you write.
Well, you covered science fiction and fantasy, and I have a
Mhm.
fairly broad range of stories. Uh, Most of my work falls into three or four series. There's the so-called Vorkosigan saga, which is science fiction adventure and other things. There is the World of the Five Gods, um, which is fantasy, alternate world fantasy. There's a subset series to that, Penric and Desdemona, which is my recent work. Then there is a four-book single story, one story cut into four volumes, uh, called The Sharing Knife, which I wrote in the whatever we're calling the first decade of the 21st century these days. And so that's most of it. And then there's one single standalone and a few nonfiction and other oddments out there.
Okay. Now, what can readers expect from the book that you would like to highlight here, or the books that you'd like to highlight in
Okay, well,
this segment?
yeah, the book that we're mostly discussing is the one that's coming out in November, which is the mass market paperback reprint of Penric's Labors, which is part of the Penric and Desdemona series. Um, a lot of stuff to say about that. Should I start at the beginning of the series or the beginning of
Yeah, yeah. Why don't you start at the beginning of the beginning of the
the
series?
whole shebang? Because it's now 11 titles. Um,
Well, yeah.
yeah, so this could take a while. Yeah, it's in the mid-teens. Now there's a decade we have a name for. I had finished Gentleman Joel and the Red Queen, which was the last book of the Vorkosigan saga for Baen, and I was kind of scratching around for something different to do. I was around 65 and thinking, what does retirement mean for a writer? Because usually they just keep going till they drop over their laptops,
They don't retire.
or are tackled to the ground. Uh, so I thought, well, what I will do is something independent. I had been playing around with ebook reprints in that market for a while. And I thought, what about doing something original? I didn't want to commit myself to a whole novel, so I thought, let's do a novella. And I wanted to do something with a really powerful sorcerer. It would be fantasy. Um, and I got to thinking about the guy and thinking about the guy, and I finally worked my way back to his beginning. And I thought, wait, this is where the story starts. So that became the story called Penric's Demon, which basically covers the two halves of the meet cute, how Penric acquired his demon, which in the world of the five gods is how a person becomes a sorcerer. They acquire a demon and these powers are shared with them. The chaos demon in turn needs to be in some physical body in order to be supported in the world of matter. It cannot exist independently. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. It is not the traditional Christian mythology or even Asian mythology version of a demon. They do not have independent existence. Um, so I had a lot of fun developing the magic system, and Penric, who is a charming young man who was not expecting this to happen to him at all, he acquired his demon quite by accident. And then I wrote, and got that out as an ebook, and wrote Penric and the Shaman, which is the next book down the line for him, following on what happened next to him for his next big adventure, which is jump forward in time. And at this point, we started getting picked up by Subterranean Press for hardcover reprints. Very nice limited edition, signed and all that stuff. And Subterranean has been very good for me, and that's something you can have in your bookstore here. Um, you handle Subterranean, yes?
I believe we would handle your
Yeah,
book.
yeah, you
Yeah.
get their stuff. Yeah, they do not sell on online booksellers at the moment, so you can only get them through bookstores. Um, and they have very, very lovely editions, but very limited print runs, so they're not a mass market kind of thing. And then I continued on. I had more story ideas and just kept on trucking with Penric. Book 10 was supposed to be another novella, but it ended up being very complicated and turned into a novel. So it is actually a kind of an outlier in terms of length. And then the next one was shorter, so we're back to that. And that brings us up to whatever year I wrote that last one, Knot of Shadows. I think it was 2002.
Did you expect it to become a series when you first wrote it?
No, it was it was an experiment. I think in terms of series comes very naturally to me. But I do not plan the series as, I do not pre-plan my series. I take it book by book and let it grow. So I never quite know what I'm going to get. Is this going to be 2 books, 6? What's going to be 17? It could be anything.
Okay.
So that's how we arrived at the latest 3 finished. Okay, and then we got through Subterranean's reprints, and as they're limited, and they had limited term of license, and then they became available to collect and do as a paper reprint collection, which could go on the bookstore market, the regular shtick. Yeah, so
Okay.
that's how we arrived here.
So what do you think draws readers to these kinds of books?
No, you have to ask the readers. Looking at reviews, the range is enormous. So reaction to the same book will be anything from 1 to 5 stars. The thing that I hear most of all is people like the characters. They're drawn to my characters, which I have many by this time. And every once in a while, some wonderful person will appreciate the world building or the science. Yes, thank you. I work on that. So mostly they get attached to the characters and their stories and their lives, and they want to know. They want to know what happens next. They want to know about their relatives. It's like they want Facebook pages for the characters. I have joked that my imaginary friends have their own Wikipedia entries. There we go.
Uh-huh. And I know one of your largest other series is excuse me, the Vorkosigan. I can't even say it. The
Everybody has trouble
Vorkosigan,
with that.
yeah, the Miles Vorkosigan series.
Mhm.
And could you tell me what was the inspiration for that series?
For Miles, well, I was in 1982, stuck in Marion, Ohio, with 2 small children and no job in the middle of the Reagan recession, no chance of getting a job that would pay a babysitter. And a friend of mine, Lillian Stewart Carl, who goes back to high school, we used to write together in high school, had started writing again in a similar situation as mine. She was homebound with kids, and started selling short stories. And I thought, to the science fiction magazines, I thought, I can do that. We used to do that together. So I embarked on what became a novelette, and then started the book that became Shards of Honor at the end of 1982. It took, as a scheme to deal with my family finances, it was really slow since I didn't sell until 1985, 86. And during that time, I'd written 3 novels. So that was and Baen bought them all 3 at the end of 1985 and brought them out all 3 in 1986, which made me very visible very quickly. So that was how my science fiction career got launched. It was a whole lot of working behind the scenes lead up until poof, there I appeared. I appeared overnight, but it wasn't overnight.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what was the inspiration actually for the Penric series? The actual inspiration?
Well, that's always assumes there's only one. Usually, when a book or story idea comes together, for me, it's like several ideas come together.
Okay.
There'll be some concatenation of things. There was a particular character type I wanted to play with. There was the idea of wanting to work with the magic. There was world building ideas that I had. And as I say, I started with a vague notion of him as an older Penric, which I finally arrived at, but then worked my way back to his beginning. And a lot of, history reading, since it was a Europeanoid fantasy background, a lot of my European history reading went into that setting. But of course, the other thing is, having decided to set this character that I wanted to play with in the world of the Five Gods, I already had a lot of prefab world building in terms of the magic system and how things worked. And so for something that was an experiment, that who knows how it would work out, I'd already done a lot of the work. So some of it was laziness. And I'd wanted, in the 3 books, The Curse of Chalian, Paladin of Souls, and The Hallowed Hunt, I had explored the magic, but I had not really explored the sorcerers. They'd been background characters. I wanted to bring one front and center and sort of follow out the logic of that setup and see what I got.
And how much research did you have to do?
The
Penric series, or
once
if
again,
any?
this is a very diffuse question, because a writer acquires information over years of time. There's all your youthful experience, there's your formal education, there's everything you've read or watched. There's travels, there's family experiences, work experiences, and it all goes into the bag and lies there. And you're writing something and suddenly realize you can pull something out from like 18 years ago that fits, just as what you need right there. So that's the kind of global research. It's just general background. And then the other kind of research that I do is when I have a story in motion or in planning, and I need to know specific things. In that case, I will focus down on specific books about areas or pieces of history or science that I need that particular information for this particular story. So with the Penric stories, a lot of reading on European literature and history that goes back forever. And then because I wanted to set the opening story in sort of the equivalent of Switzerland, 1350, I've pulled a few books, about that particular setting, time and place, and that gave me some very useful ideas that I would not have come up with on my own. History is great to steal from because it's like, they did that? They did what? Really? So that was fun.
Oh, great. So, what is your favorite research story that you've ever done in any of your books? Do you have a favorite research story?
I'm not sure I have a favorite. If we're talking about Penric's labors, one of the stories in it, novellas in it, is called The Physicians of Vilnock, and we may talk about it more explicitly later. But it's probably my oldest research because one of the ideas for one of the characters and some of what was going on goes back to a book I read in 5th grade, which was one of these kids' biographies, in this case of Walter Reed, and his research on figuring out that yellow fever was transmitted by mosquitoes and not by bedding or contact, which is what everybody thought at the time. And so this was a very seminal piece of science that he did. Basically, he took a gang of volunteers and down in wherever they were in South America, Central America, and they locked themselves up in a cabin with all this horrible used bedding and stuff from yellow fever patients, but very carefully screened so that nobody got any mosquito or bug bites, and stayed there for 2 weeks very bravely, and nobody got sick. So it was kind of how they zeroed in on mosquitoes as a vector for this very severe tropical disease. He was an army surgeon, so it was like taking out military people. Which is another thing you learn as you read history, is that a lot more soldiers were killed by disease than were ever killed in combat. I was doing some reading, a whole side project which has nothing to do with this, for a family history chapbook on the Civil War and the the militia group that my ancestor that I was looking at was in, and I ran across the data, the medical data. And basically, twice as many people died of disease, soldiers died of disease than died of wounds in the Civil War there. And that was, more recent. So, yeah, so that was the thing.
Interesting. So what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out your last book that you put out?
The most recent. That's because it's 3 different stories, there are 3 different answers. Let's see, we had the first story chronologically, I was well into the Penric and Desdemona series by this time. So the first one I wrote was The Orphans of Raspe, which was the one about Penric captured by pirates, which is always a subject I wanted to see what would happen. Pirates versus sorcerers, news at 11. And that came largely out of a book that I read called, at the back of Penric's Labors, which I should hold up here, I have what I call an outroduction, which talks about all these questions about how this stuff came together. And it was a piece of history written about Mediterranean pirates. It was published in the mid-90s. And so it sort of gave me all this information about how real pirates, not the romanticized version, but the actual grotty kidnapping slavers operated. So that was the thing I wanted to play with and draw out in my background. So it gave Penric something to work against that was realistic. So what was the question again? What was the hardest research?
What was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting it out?
Yeah, that was a challenge, but no, it wasn't a challenge because I had it all at my fingertips. It was just a question of putting it together. So yeah, at this point, book several into the series, all the challenges had all been worked out. So it was just, let's do this again. So it was not a challenge as such. As I have aged as a writer, the writing chops have gotten easier by now. I know how to write a novel. I know how to write a novella. I know how to pull my notes together. And what is harder, and has become much harder, is finding an idea that is powerful enough to support a story through the drudgery of writing. It has to be really interesting to me, and also be different from every single other thing I wrote before, which is easy when you have 2 books and a lot harder when you have 30. So there's that. So the biggest challenge is coming up with something fresh at this stage.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. All right. So what else can we expect from you in the near future?
Well, I've been on sabbatical here since I finished Knot of Shadows, which was the last Penric and Desdemona novella, which was published as an ebook in 2022 and as a Subterranean Press hardcover in 2023. I have been slacking off. So there is nothing in the pipeline at the moment until I get
really nothing, huh?
inspiration again. Speaking of what's hard, something that it was like, you're 65, or now I'm 73. What is retirement for a writer? I've not been able to quite figure this one out. It's the fans expect you to keep writing till you drop dead. And
of course.
I want to do that. Maybe I want to do something else. We'll see. If I get an idea that interests me enough, and I do enjoy the process of writing, then there's nothing to stop me.
No more Vorkosigan stories, huh?
Nothing. I never say never, but I don't have anything in mind at this time.
Okay. Well, now I have some questions for you about you as a writer. What is your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
The writing itself, when it is going well, not when you're stalled out, but that getting the words on the page and having just that key idea and having this drop out, that works, and being all excited about what you've written. That is the most fun part. And the other fun part is, of course, seeing your book read. As entertainers go, writers are very distanced from their audience. You can never see how your book is read, because it happens inside somebody else's head. So you produce this piece of art and you have no idea what happens to it after that. I've described writing a book as like giving blood. You get, it's made in your marrow, it's taken out of your veins, it goes into a bag, it goes off, and you never know what happens to it after that.
That's true.
Does it help somebody? Does it hurt somebody? Does it, does it go on the shelf and age out? All these things can happen to that. So one of the pleasures of post writing is reviews or other kinds of reader response. It gives me some sense of how my book was read. What was it that I did? And that is endlessly addictive. It did not used to be a thing that was much available when I started off back in the 80s. The only reviews you saw were, your editor would send you like 2 or 3 clippings in the course of a year. And now you can be buried in reviews. And it's really a challenge for writers to learn how to properly process and handle all this information overload. Although one of the first things I learned back in the 80s was never write back to a reviewer. I was told by a very senior writer, I think it was Fred Pohl possibly. So I took that to heart, and that has saved me from all kinds of blunders since then.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned something about being stalled out. How do you get out of that? How do you get out of that, being stalled out?
Yeah, there's a couple different kinds of ways of being blocked out. One can be external distractions. Kid is sick, you have travel, you have things you have to do, family obligations, whatever, work obligations, home repairs, surgery, all these things can throw you off track. And then the other thing is you get a certain way in the story and you don't know what happens next. You thought you were going to do this thing and it doesn't work, and you have to sort of scale back and try to figure out how. That's a period when I've been blocked for anywhere from 2 weeks to months, until I finally figure out where it's going wrong, go back and find out, okay, this is where what's wrong. You can't do this thing I was planning because it's not right. I have to think of something else. Sometimes you have to very painfully throw away material you've written. The most I've ever thrown away was 5 chapters out of Captain Vorpatrol's Alliance, when I had sent him off on a plot, the character Ivan, on a plot that was really belonged to another, was like a Miles story, like a Miles plot, and it just wasn't the right thing to do with Ivan. He didn't need to go out into the galaxy and pursue his things. He needed to stay home and let the problems come to him, which is a much more Ivanish approach. So the plot had to be made to fit the character and what the character would do, and I came up with a much better story as a result. So that was 5 chapters well binned. And other times it's just been shorter amounts. And usually I usually work things out in notes before I write my first draft. And so a lot of the mistakes and throwing away and blind alleys happen at that stage, which is much less painful and expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But frequently it'll be because I try to want the character to do something that isn't right for them. And if I wait, I can come up with a better idea.
So I was going to ask you about whether you're a pantser or an outliner.
Some of each. I make outlines, but they're like memory aids because I would not remember all this. Mm-hmm. I'm not the kind of pantser who sits down at a blank keyboard and makes it up and writes it in one step. Making it up and writing it down are 2 separate stages for me. So, so working out the scenes, working out what happens, making notes about the dialogue, a lot of ideas coming up on walks. That happens separately. And then when I get all this captured in penciled notes, then I sit down at the computer and write, and edit as I go, change as I go. And then there are post-writing editing passes, which is another thing. But then, but I don't do it all at once. I do it scene by scene, chapter by chapter. As I write, things change. So what I thought was going to be going on in chapter 5 turns out to be something completely different. So it's in between the two.
Are you a writer whose characters kind of in your head just sort of say, "Oh, let's do it this way"?
A little bit that, yeah. Until I have a character, I don't have a story. I can have setting ideas. I can have all kinds of ideas for plot. I can have this and that and the other bit of background, and nothing, it just lies there. You need a character with a problem to get the story started. So I'm not one of these writers who loves their world building and makes up a great world and then makes up characters in order to show you their great world. For me, I make up the character and build the world around them as they travel, often as they travel through the story. So it's been described as just-in-time world building.
Great. Okay, so what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process, and how do you overcome that?
It varies from story to story. Every part has been challenging at one time or another.
Right.
At this stage of the game, the mechanics are pretty much under control. When I first started, I didn't know how to write a novel. I'd never written one before. So just trying to get words down in a coherent way and getting it all worked out was enough to fill my plate, one book at a time. It has shifted over the years from process to idea becoming harder.
And what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career? Do you have a favorite adventure?
Well, writers mostly sit at home with their computer. They are not having an adventure.
You must have had
writing,
some adventure.
Yeah. Nevertheless, my career has brought me a lot of travel opportunities. The conventions drag you out, and occasionally book tours, but mostly conventions. Probably the overseas conventions have been the most challenging and memorable. Once I started to get those invitations, it was really exciting. I've been to Australia, I've been to New Zealand, I've been to Croatia, and St. Petersburg, Russia. So there've been some pretty amazing trips so far. And Spain, a couple times to Spain.
Did you have a favorite story?
About all the travels?
Yeah.
You're asking about a lot of stuff. I don't know. Nothing that I can pop up at the moment that stands
Nothing
out.
that you can say, "Oh, this was just
was
absolutely amazing."
All of them had amazing moments and tedious moments and the horrors of passing through customs moments. Not like airports or airplanes. Well, airplanes, I hate airports nowadays.
Yeah.
Getting there is fun, People meet you.
Being there is great.
Yeah, having arrived is good. And the wonderful thing about being a guest like this is you get local people who square you around. You're not, lost by yourself. You have help and charming folks who are happy to see you, and it's a wonderful way to tour.
Yeah, that's great. So, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
Looking back over it all, I suppose if I have to pull out one thing, is that writing is a very redemptive profession, because all of your mistakes can be reclassified as raw material, and you can use them, you can recycle them into stories and things, so that nothing is wasted. All those courses you dropped out of, all those things you never finished, all those things that went awry, become material and become more manageable psychologically and otherwise, and also very useful. So, my 5 years I spent wandering around in college and left without a degree, to my parents' dismay, all turned out to be useful to my career, which nobody would have guessed at the time.
And what was your degree in?
I
again?
didn't get one.
Oh, well, what were you studying?
Lots of different things. Yeah, I just kept changing majors. It's English major for a while. The thing I was in the most was biology. And probably the most memorable thing was a 6-week zoology study tour to East Africa, which I took at
Oh,
age
yes, that's
21
right. I read
with the
about that.
class. As a matter of fact, was interested in wildlife photography at the time and photography generally. So I still have the slides, and I had hauled them out the other night, actually, just the other night for a friend who wanted to see the slides of bugs. Lots of slides of interesting insects. And so we went through 2 carousel trays. Another friend still had a carousel projector, and went through all those pictures. So that was a trip. And I used the landscape for a couple of stories, and other experiences there have popped out, that now I can use that moment, and put it here because it fits. So that was, my non-wasted college years, but nevertheless are not a degree. My parents were also like, you get a degree and you get a job in your degree, and there is no degree that leads into creative writing, really, not even creative writing degrees. You're much better off going to learn something and getting out in the world and then bringing that to your writing.
Yeah, I think it's great to learn so many different things because you
Yeah,
can
it's just
use
kind
them
of,
all when you write,
all this
you
time
know?
I was unconsciously training to be a writer. Yes, that was what was going on, sure.
Absolutely. So, what piece of advice would you want to share with other authors?
Hmm. Looking at all the sort of mania for self-promotion and all the promotional stuff that, writers are bombarded with these days, I would say don't get distracted by that. The one thing that sells the most books for me, and I can see it in my sales figures, is the next book, the next story. It does more to boost my sales than any other thing I can do. So a little promotion is okay. It's fine if you enjoy it, but it's more important to spend your energy writing the next thing.
Huh, interesting. What a great
She says
idea.
while doing promotion. But yeah,
What a great idea. Huh. It's great if you
hypocritical
have
at this moment.
it's a great idea if you have a series.
Mm. Well, or anything, whether it's a series or not. Well, things cross sell. Getting more than one thing out there gives people, if they like that, they can go to the next thing. If there is no next thing, then they wander off into other writers and you are forgotten.
Hmm, very good point. So, are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you recommend to other writers that have helped you in your career?
I have used writers groups all through my career from the very beginning, transferring from one to another, either as I changed locations or changed interests or, found something that was more useful. So there are no specific ones I would recommend. It's a lot easier to get feedback nowadays with all the online abilities. Before in the 80s, you had to go find people and hand them pieces of paper with your story written on it and listen to them. And now you can schlep email back and forth, schlep your stories that way. So not specifically, but once again, I've used test readers forever and still do. Just once again, trying to find out how my story is read. What did I say? What did you receive? Did what you received match what I meant to say? So I find beta readers or test readers or however whatever vocabulary we're using for them these days to still be invaluable. So however you can find them, you need to find people who are a little better than you. That's helpful, or even a lot better to kind of pull you up, and don't get too distracted by the socialization possibilities. You're not here to have a good time. You're here to get your story critiqued.
Right.
So.
Very good point there. Okay, now I have questions about you as a person.
Uh-huh.
What is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
How to pronounce my name and spell it, and first of all, The surname is Bujold, Bujold. It's pronounced with the French J, not the Spanish Bujold. I can always tell when somebody's from the West Coast because they try to say Bujold. It's Bujold. Although I use Lois McMaster Bujold as my writing name, McMaster is my maiden name, and I use it as my middle name. So you should file my books under B, not M. So that's important for people to know when looking for my books. So,
Okay, yeah.
it's like Robert
Okay,
Van Gulik, who got filed under V and G, sometimes in the same library. It's a mystery writer from way back when, Van Gulik. Yeah. But,
okay.
yeah.
So this
all under B, so we can find it. Yeah.
You might not have an answer for this one, so it's okay.
Okay.
What? Oh, you might. So, what question do you wish interviewers would ask you, and what would your answer be?
It doesn't work for Zoom interviews, but I would say, do you want a back rub? Would be the most welcome question, to which the answer would be yes, but not for a Zoom interview. We can't do it that.
Ah, yes.
Beyond that, I don't think I have a specific question. It's just whatever people want to know. I don't know what you want to know. You have to tell me.
Okay, that's good. So, what is or are your passions when you're not writing? And how do you
Oh,
make time for the things that you love? And I know now you're sort of
I'm
making
spoiled
time
for
for
time.
everything.
Yeah, I wish I could take these 4-hour blocks of time in which I am doing absolutely nothing useful and send them back to my 1980s and 1990s self, who was so desperate for every minute, that she could get. Because it's all wasted on me. In the 80s and 90s and earlier in my career, I basically stripped down my interests because I was building up a career. I was working my way out of a not very good marriage. I was trying to make a living. I had 2 small children. There was just no time for anything. And I didn't really much add it back in as I got older and as things gradually eased off, kids moved out and so on. Lately, I am finding the one thing I did not do back in the early days was watch much television. There wasn't time, and television wasn't all that great, so I wasn't missing much.
That's for
But
sure.
now
There
in
wasn't
the
much of it either.
now in the wide new world of streaming media, where it comes what you want when you want, and these incredible streaming sites with so much more choice than ever existed before. All of a sudden, television has gotten really interesting. The streaming sites I look at, first of all, nonfiction for Wondrium.com, which is the Great Courses rebranded into their streaming site. So if you remember the Great Courses from the library or wherever you used to see them, I call it Professor in a Box. So if you need some nonfiction that's a cut above PBS but not so far above that you can't reach, that's a good place. PBS.org is also good. And then I've watched anime for years and read a little manga. So there are now anime streaming sites. Crunchyroll is the one I'm on. And then lately, just in the last few years, I've discovered live action Asian streaming media. So things like The Untamed and Hotel Del Luna, which are both on Netflix. And turns out 10,000 more have been an introduction to me to like whole fantasy genres I knew nothing about. Xanxia, spelled Xianxia, is a Chinese, very old fantasy genre that owes nothing to Tolkien. It's got all its own tropes and cliches, and you learn what they are by immersion. Everybody kind of knows the martial arts, but the Xanxia's got the fantasy and gods and demons and magic going for it, which attracts me a lot. But Chinese gods and demons and magic and zombies, Chinese zombies, so they're great. So that's been a real education because I would hit these things and then I would have to go look up, what is this referring to? So I find myself reading Wikipedia articles on Taoism in order to understand this silly fantasy I just watched.
Wow.
So it's been good for me.
Interesting. Yeah. There is so much out there now.
Mm,
A lot of it is kind of
yeah.
but
The interesting thing about the streaming sites is you not only get the good stuff, you get the second-rate stuff, and that's really culturally enlightening.
that's
Oh,
true.
this is what their crap looks like. Yeah, it's just like our crap. How about that?
Yep, definitely. So what does your writing space look like? And what do you need to have around you, or what did you need to have around you when you were writing and editing?
Mm-hmm. Well, that also has changed over the years. In the beginning, I had no writing space. I had, a notebook on pencil in my living room or up in my bedroom, and when I finally got a computer in the back of my dining room, sort of all squished together. I did my first three novels, with electric typewriter set up on my kitchen table. But then we moved. I got a bedroom that I could devote, to my own, to be my own office for a while. And then I moved again, and I've got a very nice space now, which is up on the front window, overlooking the very nice view that I have out my front lawn. Fox ran on across the lawn as I was sitting at my laptop this morning. I can see eagles. I can see all kinds of interesting birds, hummingbirds at my little garden. And then the house came with what they called an office, which was basically a closet that had been revamped. It had no windows, but it does have filing cabinets. So that's, it's kind of the business office, but the actual writing takes place, or the actual typing takes place out by the front window. So that's
Oh,
very, very pleasurable now.
oh, nice.
Like,
Do you
so
have
much
any
light.
specific food or drink or anything that you need to have with you when you're writing?
I don't need it. I usually have tea around when I'm drinking anything, but no food. Keep the food away from the computer.
And writers often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions to help them through their work. And do you have any? And do they help you or hinder you?
Not anymore. I used to have cats. I had cats for years and years and years, and eventually we got to the last round of cats, and I was like surrounded by dying pets for way too long. It's like no more cats after that. So no
Yeah.
pets now.
Okay.
It's
Um,
alas. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Now I have just two more questions for you. One is where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And I always have to put a plug in for Annie's.
Absolutely. I remember
And
my signing at your place back years ago in the blizzard.
yeah,
Quite an
Patty told
event.
me about that. Yeah, she said
Almost
there
couldn't
was a
make it.
blizzard there.
And I actually had four people show up and slog through it to get there. I was
That's
impressed.
awful.
Anyway, yeah, where can we get it besides Annie's?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Annie's actually you can get your books at Annie's if you call us at 508-796-5613, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. And where else can they find your books?
Okay. Well, the usual bookstores are a little thin at the moment if you just walk in and look for them, but you can order them through bookstores, bricks and mortar bookstores.
Yeah.
The other outlet that is big for me, where I am in Minneapolis, is Uncle Hugo's Science Fiction Bookstore and Dreamhaven Books and Comics, both of which can get books signed. And both Annie's and Hugo's can still get Subterranean books, which are not sold online. So if you want those nice Subterranean signed signed editions, like here's the Physicians of Vilnock, which is actually out of print at Subterranean, but they come with signed prints. You get them signed. Um, some of them are pre-signed. Shadows it was a fancy edition that came pre-signed. And you can order that through Hugo's and presumably through Annie's. So all these really beautiful subpress volumes, but they're expensive as we learn. There's Assassins of Barcelona, which is also sold out at subpress. or telling you about books you can't have. More recently, the Baen collections,
Yes.
Penric stories have all been collected by Baen Books in paper. We started with Penric's Progress, which is the first 3 novellas. We were talking about Penric's Demon. The first novella is in that, and Penric and the Shaman, and Penric's Fox. So that was fun. And then they followed up with Penric's Travels, which has got 3 more stories. A lot of fun with Penric. This unfortunately came out in May of 2020, when all the bookstores were closing, which did not do well for my series. But we have finally followed up with a 3rd one, with 3 more. And so Penric is very available. Ordered through regular bookstores, or if you want them signed, Uncle Hugo's or Dreamhaven.
That sounds great. And my last question is, how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Well, the place to find out about whatever I'm doing, which is not much lately, I blog on Goodreads, if you know that site.
Goodreads.
And if you type into your search engine Lois McMaster Bujold Goodreads blog, it should come up right on your first screen. So not hard to find there, but you have to know it's Goodreads. There's also a fan-run wiki devoted to my books now, a Vorkosigan wiki. So if you search Vorkosigan wiki, you can find that fan site that is still active. So let's see what else is online for me. There are other fan activities, but I don't know yet what they all are. But yeah, the official me is at Goodreads.
Yeah, and you do have a web page. It's not updated.
Yeah, I do not actually have a web page. What Dendary.com is a fan run site.
Oh, okay.
So it never belonged to me, and it is not updated by me. So it's not a proper author,
It gets not updated.
Promote my books to you thing. It was a labor of love by a British fan named Mike Bernardi. And it's still there, but it's not being much kept up anymore because he too is getting older and has other things to do. But there's some sort of there's interesting archived materials on it if you want to look at the older Bujold. But no, I don't have a website as such. I just rely on Goodreads.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, Lois, for joining me, and really appreciate your coming. And maybe if you do get to Worcester sometime, you'll be able to come and join us again, not in the middle of the winter or whatever in a blizzard.
With actual physical paper books, that would be fun.
Yes. With the Baen books.
Yeah, we got to get those out.
That would be wonderful.
All righty.
Lois McMaster Bujold, thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.